Keeping your head above water, making a way when you can. Temporary layoffs, good times, easy credit rip-offs, good times, scratching and surviving, hanging in a child line, good times. We be lucky we got 'em, do, good time, yeah. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Welcome back, guys, and shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. We are back in the house. We have a lot to discuss tonight, and we will do call in tonight. I know I did it already Tuesday night, but we're going to do call in tonight as well because I'm not going to be live on Sunday. It's New Year's Eve, so I have things going on there. So I figure I'd talk to you guys at least twice this week. But first, we're going to get started giving shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on? CBC Voter says, happy Thursday, Sabby Sabs. Shout out to Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says, Shaka when the walls fell. What's going on? Loco Cola. Why would anyone want to talk to or debate anything Roland Martin? He talks down to Black people. He's a Democratic Black shill shuddering like Porky Pig, waiting for his bone and biscuit handout. Damn. Shout out to Miguel says peace. Greetings, Julia says hi, Sabby. What's going on? Rose says hi. Shout out to Eric Gray says, hey, everyone. And yeah, the Roland Martin and CENK UYGUR segment should be a lot of fun. Oh, it's something. It is something. What's going on? Zero Joshua gives a thumb up. He's also a Sabby member. Shout out to Bryce says, good evening, Sabby and everyone. What's going on? My comrade JB says, happy Thursday, everyone, and forehead kisses. Shout out to Lorez says, hey, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. NIKKI, another cringe remark you don't say. Chelsea was okay back then. She's establishment now. After being awakened by you and RBN, JD, Bernie, comedy isn't the same anymore. What's going on? Sean says, yo, JB, great stream earlier. Shout out to Joe OWS says, so it begins. Greetings, Mark Pugsley says, Sabby, I took the big bone from the Christmas ham and made black-eyed peas for New Year's. You know, that's a tradition. I don't know if everyone is familiar with that tradition, but it's kind of this thing on New Year's Eve, you make black-eyed peas, you make collard greens, and you make cornbread. And each one of them stand for something. I think the collard greens is supposed to bring you money in the new year. I forget what the peas and the cornbread are for, but it's really good. It's a good meal. Shout out to Rich says, let's get sabinated. Greetings, Volvo says, hey, Cookie. Greetings, Zombie in the air. Sends the cool sunglasses. Shout out to Sophia says, hey, Sabby in chat. What's going on? Rick says, good times. That's right. I was singing the theme from Good Times. Scratching and surviving. Hanging in a child line. And I know Roger Meadows and other people have informed me that the lyrics are not hanging in a chow line. But that's what I've known my whole life. And I tried to sing it the other way, hanging in a jiving, and it just doesn't flow the same, you know. I'm stuck with hanging in a chow line. Shout out to Donald, sends a thumbs up. Greetings, DSMS Sinister. CENK versus Roland, the loud mouth versus the bootlick. I can't wait. Shout out to JK Engineering and Architecture. Empress Sabby, my favorite. You and Brianna, my Empress Revolutionary and Freedom Fighter. Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. What's going on? Christmas Sheep says, bye. What's going on? Neho says, peace and love, comrades. Shout out to Justin, says, I'm so happy to see Sabby live. She makes my day with her media. I wish she could make her quality content every day. I wish I could too, Justin. I got a lot going on around here. Oh, man. Shout out to Tia Wheeler, says Uyghur versus Martin. This ought to be interesting. Yes, it is. Shout out to Sebastian, says, hey, y'all. Greetings to Wayne, who's a Sabby member, says, hello, 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 hello. Is it me you're looking for? And shout out to Roger Meadows, who's a Sabby member, says, damn, just getting back on the Colorado ballot. They kicked him off main ballot. Yes. Big Trump news there. I'll probably discuss that tomorrow evening. Probably tomorrow evening. Yeah. I think I'll talk about that then. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and get started because I do want to do call in tonight. I want to go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters in the Heezy. Yes, I said Heezy, I know. Shout out to Sabbies as well. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Catherine Natarabi, Catherine Natarabi, Roger Clark, and Ed Murray. Whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. All right, guys, what are we discussing tonight? You know, we have some educational content tonight I think I'm going to start off with first, but let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing CENK UYGUR versus Roland Martin. Ay. Oh boy, that one is going to be interesting. We're also going to discuss, if you have not heard, Nikki Haley's cringe remark, and you'll see that is actually Kaylin Collins behind Nikki Haley there. We're also going to discuss who I've never spoken about on the show before, but Chelsea Handler is being called out for a pro-Israel video that she recently made. We'll get into that. And last but not least, this story, I'm sorry, I will not let the housing issue go. This story is huge. Wall Street homes. Yes, it is not 2008 anymore, but I think you need to hear about what is still happening when it comes to housing in this country and how Wall Street is still very much invested and how it could impact you later on down the line. So let's go ahead and get started with the first story. In 2008, I think a lot of us remember the housing crisis where Wall Street stole homes, just calling it what it is. They stole homes from particularly a lot of elderly residents. When it came down to it, Barack Obama, during his presidency, decided to bail out Wall Street instead of the American people. Now, some people hear about that and they feel like that was in the past. We've gotten beyond that. But apparently we have not. Because this story came my way yesterday. Someone sent this to me. The housing crisis is still an issue in this country. And if you own your home, or you're thinking about purchasing a home, I think you need to hear this story. We all know that homes have become increasingly more unaffordable in this country, but somebody's buying them. And if it isn't the American people who are buying these homes, who are buying these homes? Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. It says, if homes are unaffordable, then who is buying them? Pay attention, folks, because you may not be affected by this now, but I guarantee you, if this does not change, if we do not get rid of like corporate landlords, if we don't get rid of these Wall Street companies buying these homes, your home in the future may not belong to you. Let's go ahead and get into it.
It's one side of the story that we haven't covered yet. Everything that we've talked about has led to insane rents. The higher rents go, the less likely it is for people to be able to afford a deposit. If you're paying 50% of your income to some landlord or some Wall Street bank, it cripples your ability to save up anything, and it's a complete drain on the economy. That's not an exaggeration for some, as Londoners are paying over 50% of their income to rent on average. London renters also paid around £3,000 more than homeowners for what is essentially a much worse deal. On average across the UK, renters pay around 34% of their income on average to housing costs, nearly 4 times.
So this just goes to show you, he's talking about the UK first, but this is not just an American problem. This is happening internationally.
As much as the 9% that the average homeowner pays. Now sure, homeowners are normally richer than renters, so the figure is skewed by that fact, but it's still a clear example of how the West is changing. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. What's really destroying the renting market though is the chronic housing shortage. The majority of local councils in the UK haven't built a single home in the past 5 years, despite over 1 million people on the waiting list nationwide. Anyone who's been in the unfortunate position of needing to rent a place in a big city knows how awful it can be. In New York, hour-long waits and long lines of viewers are the norm for even the most overpriced, dilapidated apartments. Elsewhere, it can take months to find a place, with renters often being forced to offer the first 6 months up front, or even the whole year just to get a chance. Add in reference checks and the evasive questions and it's more like a job interview now. All of this, and people get much smaller, run-down living spaces. You just can't build a good life when your kitchen, your bedroom, and your living room are all the same room. It's a
They are shoving people into shoeboxes, okay? And again, this is not just a New York City problem, although that is the city people tend to point to, but it's happening all across the country, and it's even happening in cities like London. They want you to own less, they want you to have less, and they feel that you will be happy. The 6 months upfront rent has to be the most disgusting thing that I have heard. I already thought it was too much to ask someone to give 3 months rent up front, but we now have gotten to the point where, again, some of these corporate landlords asking people for 6 months rent up front. Obviously, that excludes a big segment of the population. How many working class people can afford to come up with 6 months rent up front? Even some middle class people can't afford to come up with that. The housing market has moved more in favor for wealthy people, and it is hurting those that are working class.
Trap that more and more people can't get out of. In the UK, the renting population has doubled in the past 20 years, and if you're stuck renting, then you're always stuck paying someone else's mortgage, building their wealth and life instead of your own. However predatory mortgages might get, at least there's the eventual promise that you'll actually own the home. Although that's after you've paid years of interest to the bank, and you probably won't actually own the land. You just lease it. It's a trend that surpasses the housing crisis, the movement away from individual ownership. In the World Economic Forum's infamous predictions for 2030, they claim that you will own nothing and be happy with it. This is...
Hold on to that phrase. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They are creating a society of forever renters. This is where they want you to be. They don't want you to own homes. Have you ever noticed, for those of you that tried to go through the home buying process or you were considering doing so, have you noticed that there seems to be a shortage of single family homes? But is it actually a shortage? Because it comes to this. It's not so much that there aren't many single family units. It's more so that somebody else is buying those homes, and it's most likely not the American people. That's why when you go to look for a house, that's why there isn't much available. And I'll show you an example here in Massachusetts. Someone's buying those homes. You're going to find out.
The key. And it's a big part of why institutional investors are scrambling to get in on the rental market by buying up family homes. They know what's coming because they're constantly trying to create it. The ingredients for it are already here. You don't need to own your own car, you can just use Uber. If you need to buy anything, a drone can deliver to your house. You don't need a cashier, you can use a machine. You never actually need to leave, other than going to the other tiny cubicle where you can spend the other half of your life in artificially lighted work. Might as well.
You hear this, guys? Think about it. You don't need to own your own home. You can just rent. You don't need to own a car. You can use an Uber. Although I would argue the Uber drivers need to own a car. Duh. So there's that. Do you see what they're trying to push? We have to be very careful.
Well, get your money's worth for that $3,000 a month studio apartment anyway. You don't need to actually buy anything either. You can just use credit to pay it out over the course of years. You don't need to own a home. You'll be much happier renting for the rest of your life. Even media and entertainment operate off these rules now. Subscription systems and monthly fees are the new norm for everything. It spreads so far that printers and other appliances now have subscription fees. Subscriptions that lock people out of using the thing they bought if they stop paying them. Obviously, most people aren't happy about this. It's a major cause for the underlying resentments you see in people today. But what choice do they have? Take the car example. Most people in America live in places with little to no public transport. Even your own two legs are mostly useless because everything's so spread out and built for cars. Uber and ride-sharing is becoming the only choice. That's despite the fact that it's far more expensive in the long run anyway. It's soon becoming a world where corporations own everything. It lets them extract far more money out of each person. If you're a company and you sell something for $100, obviously you only get $100. But if people rent it though for just $5 a month, they're already paying more in less than 2 years. Turning every transaction into debt simply makes them more money and gives them more power.
Let's pause here for a second. We are becoming not just a forever renter society, but a subscription-based society. Notice how everybody wants you to, buy a subscription just to use their service now. It's become more difficult for some of the news outlets, actually. There are some of them like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. In order for me to read this one article, subscribe. Only $1 a week. Only this. Next thing you know, you have all these little tiny bills, but they add up over time. Remember, most people don't buy newspapers anymore. So they're like, how can we make money? Let's make them purchase a subscription in order to read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime. All require you to have a subscription. Remember the days when you actually used to go to the store and purchase a DVD? I still have DVDs. I haven't watched them in a long time, but I still have them from back in the day. This isn't a thing anymore. Everybody wants you to subscribe to something and own nothing. And this is where we're moving as a society.
Ownership is being eroded everywhere you look. Even your own privacy is gone, renamed as data and stolen by these same companies to make the adverts slightly more annoying and effective. It's all part of the modern feudal system that they're trying to create. But most people can't see the bigger picture here. They just see the instant access we now have to every kind of instant pleasure you could possibly think of, and they consider it progress. At our current pace, we may well hit the World Economic Forum's predictions of 2030. Often it's framed as a necessary change in order to stop climate change. The responsibility shifted to regular people, pressuring them to use paper straws, take shorter showers, and generally live worse lives. It's a psychological tactic to shift the blame without even acknowledging it happened. The real damage is done by corporations and governments. With all the garbage in the ocean, most...
Okay, and then they get into the climate issue. Now, I want to stay on the housing issue here because people need to understand why this is happening. Wall Street is buying a lot of U.S. homes. And yes, this happened during the 2008 housing crisis where they actually stole these homes from people, but this has not ended. Wall Street is still buying single family homes. They're buying those homes and they're choosing to rent those homes out. But why are they doing this? Why is Wall Street buying so many U.S. homes? Let's get into this clip here.
There are many problems in the modern housing market, but the biggest one for Americans tends to be the price.
Prices rose 40% from the start of the pandemic.
In the final quarter of 2022, the typical U.S. home sold for a record-shattering $468,000. That's unaffordable for most Americans, leaving them to rent.
The housing costs are completely out of line with wages.
Some members of Congress believe Wall Street is a part of the problem.
What's outrageous is your tax dollars are helping Wall Street buy up single-family homes. You're
Of course, they got Ro Con Man in this video, which is really funny.
subsidizing Wall Street.
Massive private equity firms like Blackstone and Pradium Partners have backed a relatively new breed of homeowner, the corporation. This growing industry buys or builds single-family homes and then rents them out.
We hear from community organizers that are door knocking in certain neighborhoods and are just surprised by how many of the homes on a particular block will be owned by a corporate landlord.
Industry advocates say corporate landlords play a critical role in addressing the nationwide housing crisis.
What we have in housing in the United States is a chronic shortage since the financial crisis.
And so the question really is, how do we fill that gap? Is the answer incentivizing new housing development, new housing investment, new market participation?
What's behind the rise of corporate landlords? And how, if at all, will the government regulate them?
And this is a big part of the problem. We have no regulation for this issue. This is why it continues to happen. And when they discuss this idea of building more housing developments, oftentimes this means actually removing people from low income neighborhoods, pushing them out by implementing or inserting a Whole Foods, a brewery. Don't get me wrong. I like my breweries, but a Whole Foods, a brewery, a juice bar, things that are going to increase the value of the property. So the landlords that owned those apartment buildings, they're more willing to sell them to corporate investors. Lower income people are pushed out of that neighborhood, have a longer commute now in order to get to work. And then what will happen is developers will come in, they will flip those apartment buildings and turn them into luxury condos. This happens in Boston all the time. So that's their idea of building more housing developments. They're less likely to build more single family homes and more likely to build luxury condo developments. So this idea of building more housing developments doesn't necessarily mean they're building single family homes for one, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're building housing for working class people.
As of 2023, corporate landlords only command a small portion of the rental housing in this country. The vast majority of all rental units, including apartments, are owned by individual, small-time investors. But there's growing focus on single-family homes.
Institutions, large companies, only account for about 1% of all the rental housing in the United States and only about 2% of the single-family rental housing.
There's a small but mighty group of companies that lead the industry.
So Pretium is the parent company for a company called Progress Residential that owns about 90,000 homes. They were started by Don Mullen, who came out of Goldman Sachs.
Pause here. That company was started by Don Mullen, who is a former partner of Goldman Sachs. First of all, these companies should not own homes. This is ridiculous. This is why you can't find a home. It's not just because you're not making a living wage. It's also because these houses are being bought by people like Don.
His mortgage group, Invitation Homes, was started by Blackstone, but Blackstone sold their position a long time ago. They own about 80,000 homes. American Homes for Rent, which was started by Wayne Hughes, they own about 60,000 homes. There's a company called Tricon Residential that's out of Canada. And then there's one called Amherst. Those are the big five.
In recent years, corporate landlords have been most active in the Sun Belt. In 2021, corporations bought 28% of all the homes sold in Texas.
Pause, because I want you to see this map. You see, guys, a lot of people think this is just a problem that's happening in the Northeast or the West Coast, right? No, no, no. Look at this map. This is happening in Texas, 28%. They own 28% of homes in Texas. That's insane. Look at where else they are. More so the Southeast, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, North Carolina is scooping in here. So you can see where they're going to places, these states that more likely have more land. So I used to live in the South, so I know there's more land in the South than there is here up here in the Northeast. So that's where they're buying up a lot of these homes.
That figure was 19% in Georgia and 16% in Florida. Companies like Pradium and Blackstone target these markets. Blackstone in particular has held large stakes in several companies that dominate the region. Rent hikes for single-family homes in this region have outpaced other parts of the country. Since the onset of the pandemic, rents for a two-bed detached home increased about 43% in Phoenix.
Phoenix. You see this, guys? 43% in Phoenix. This is insane.
They're up 44% in Tampa and 35% in Atlanta.
44% in Tampa, Florida, 35% in Atlanta, Georgia. So you see what I mean? It's not just states like Massachusetts and California. They are operating in some of these states that actually have a lower cost of living. They're hitting those areas.
That's compared to 24% nationwide. Experts say that many of the properties bought up by institutional groups were previously owned by people who were destabilized in recent recessions.
There you go. And that's what they've been doing. People who have basically either bottomed out during a recession, some of them more likely 2008, they buy up these homes and then they start to rent them out. And now the banks own them. And there's no law against this. That's a big part of the problem. We need a law that prevents corporations from buying single family homes. That should be on the books day one. In fact, anyone who is running for president right now, put that on your platform. This is a huge problem.
After the pandemic, people saw the opportunity to go into these lower income neighborhoods, working class neighborhoods, buy up these houses and in communities that the working class can afford. And they're holding these houses, often for years, taking them off the market, making it even harder for young people and working class families to own a house.
Yeah, and Rokana, you trading stocks, so you trading stocks, so you really don't have any room to talk here.
Companies like Blackstone make serious money from these investments. For example, the company's real estate income trust delivered an 8.4% return on investment in 2022. This in a year when the wider stock market declined nearly 20%.
Part of the problem with private equity involved in housing is that they're in it for the short term. Their goal is to take a company, increase cash flow in order then to sell it or to take it public, which they did in the case of Invitation Homes. Unlike, maybe smaller landlords who still are looking to have a profit, may be in it more for the long term and see it as a long-term investment, are more concerned in terms of stability and concerned in terms of satisfied tenants and wanting there to be less turnover. With private equity, it's really about kind of maximizing the short-term returns.
In particular, real estate funds issued by private equity groups can be a useful hedge against inflation, boosting their popularity. Analysts write that by 2030, institutions may own 7.6 million single-family rental homes.
Let's go back to that number because I want people to really understand. They're saying institutions will own 7.6 million single-family rental homes by 2030. We don't have that long to get there. 2030 is actually just around the corner, folks. We need a bill, a piece of legislation right now that is passed to outlaw private equity from owning single-family homes. This is only going to get worse.
30. Institutions may own 7.6 million single-family rental homes. That could be more than 40% of the market. But that's a big if. Many real estate experts say the main solution to the problematic housing market is to build fast.
In the late 70s, early 80s, the United States routinely generated between 300,000 and 400,000 starter homes a year. In 2020, we generated 65,000.
So the numbers there are very telling. Look how many homes were built in the 1970s versus 2020. It is very clear what they're trying to push here, folks. They don't want us to have home ownership. Now, I'm very fortunate. I do have a home. I was lucky during the pandemic because they really decreased the interest rates. And I also participated in the first-time home buyer program. So don't Don't get it twisted. I had some help. Okay. Like my parents helped. So that's something to think about. But had it not been for those things happening, had it not been for the pandemic and the interest rates dropping as much as they did, had it not been for the help from our parents, I wouldn't own a home right now either. And the housing prices have continued to increase since the pandemic. So there's no way I would be able to buy this house today. They don't want us to own a home, you guys. They want us to be forever renters. Now I want to show you something else, because I want you to think about this, especially for those of you that have kids. I want you to think about their future. What happens when Wall Street buys most of the homes on your block? Let's get into this. Corporate landlords concentrated their purchases in middle and working class neighborhoods, many with larger Black and Latino populations, such as the Bradfield Farms neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, where large investors who paid in cash bought 50% of the homes. Investors went hog wild, said a local real estate agent. They are literally walking in to working class neighborhoods and pulling your home away from you. This is what they are doing. So much for the American dream. I tell people, if I meet someone and they just moved to the US and they say, oh, I came here, I'm going to do the American dream. I said, welcome to the American nightmare. Because if you don't come to this country with money, if you don't come to this country with degrees, it's not going to be too great for you, boo. It goes on to say cash offers from corporate landlords are appealing to home sellers because they don't have to wait for an appraisal and inspection or have a sale fall through if the buyer can't get a mortgage. So you have cash offers. These companies are showing up paying with cash. And if you're trying to sell, if you are a corporate landlord and you're trying to sell, obviously you're going to take the cash offer. The average person that's looking for a house, there's a couple of things we got to go through. Number one, you got to get the loan from the bank. That's the biggest hurdle. After you get approved for the loan, then there's the issue of we have to do the homeowner inspection. Some of these corporate landlords don't want to wait for that. There have been a number of times where people have had a home inspection and they said, never mind, I'm backing out of this. I'm not doing it. There's too many issues with this house. Here in Massachusetts, it has gotten to the point where what we call them, home shoppers, people who are trying to buy a home, they are actually choosing to forego the home inspection. Never, ever do that. That is terrible. That is a big mistake. There could be something seriously wrong with that house that you do not see based on the aesthetics because they have painted it very nicely. So they may have covered up mold or any other issues with that house. But people are doing that. That's how desperate people are to get these homes. It goes on to say the proliferation of corporate landlords by single family homes prevents potential buyers from building generational wealth through home ownership. The reality is this, folks. What is the best way to increase your net worth? Home ownership. Net worth is different from income. Your income is what you actually make, what you take home, your take home pay. Your net worth is what you own minus what you owe. So if you don't own anything, how are you going to build generational wealth? What are you going to have to pass down to your children? What are your children going to have to pass down to their grandchildren? So that's very important. It goes on to say here, they say they can rent you the American dream. But I know hundreds of people who don't want to rent. They want to own. That's coming from Jessica Marino, a community organizer with Action North Carolina. In the last few years, corporate landlords have seen their profits soar as rents increased by double-digit percentages and home prices rose at their fastest clip in U.S. history. In the Bradfield Farms neighborhood, the average home price skyrocketed 48% from 2021 to 2023. Wall Street investors have turned single-family rental homes into attractive investment assets, bundling multiple properties into portfolios for investors, including pension funds and mutual funds. Now let's have some fun. Let's play a little game. I want to show you what it looks like here in Massachusetts. We're going to pull up Redfin. Move you out the way. Wish I could scoot you over out the way too. Oh, we'll just make this larger. Well, let me make it larger. Can I make it larger? Oh, I can just zoom in. This is Malden, Massachusetts. So Malden, and just to show you from the map, it's north of Boston. So here's Boston, there's Somerville, and there's Cambridge. So I chose Malden because it's far enough from Boston that you would think the home prices would be lower, but it is also close enough that if needed to be, you can hop onto the T, which is our public transportation here, and you can get to the city quite easily. Now, what you have to understand, Malden actually used to be a working class neighborhood. Check out the prices of the homes in Malden. I wish I can go in closer for you. I wish that this part wasn't here, but I don't know how to remove that. Okay, so I don't want to remove the outline. Look at this. This is Everett. This is Malden. $569,000. That's on the Malden Everett line. Want to see what that house looks like? It's not a house. It's a condo. You see this? $569,000. Again, Malden was a working class neighborhood. This is absolutely insane. Also, Malden, $1.5 million. So $1 million house. Look at this. 6 bedrooms. This is all you can find. $799,000, 5 bedroom. And I bet you this house is old. I bet you it's old. You can flip through the pictures here. They renovated a little bit in the inside, but look at this. Does this look like $799,000? You can't even fix those cabinets, boo. Right? $700,000. Again, Malden, 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bath. Would you pay $700,000 for a house that has 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bath? I lived in different places, but I can tell you I lived in the South, and there's no way in Malden. This isn't some fancy neighborhood. Like I said, it was a working class neighborhood. Here's another one. $2.55 million. Insane. They're trying to sell that entire property as 17 bedrooms. So these are your choices, folks. These are your choices. And this is what I was trying to show people. We can go further up. We can go to Melrose. Melrose is quite nice. $679,000. Get you this. This. Does that house look like it's worth 600? Honey, let's go to the pictures, okay? What is this? This house looks like it was built 1950 something. The kitchen is not renovated. There's something happening here with the wall. Looks like that might have been water damage. You see this? Look at the walls. This is what they want you to pay for. And if this hallway doesn't look like it's from 1972, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. This house has not been renovated in any way, shape, or form, and they want you to pay $679,000. This is what people are stuck with here. If you didn't, I'm gonna keep it real. If you did not get a house during the height of the pandemic and you're trying to get one now and you have 2 incomes coming in, let's say you're making $170,000 a year, both of you together. That's nothing here. That's what people have to understand. It wasn't always this way. It wasn't always this way. You will meet people in Malden, in Melrose, Massachusetts, that grew up there, that still have their home from when they got married back in the 70s, and they didn't pay anywhere near this. This is insane. You can no longer be working class in this state, at least in the Boston area, and buy a home. But it's not just Massachusetts. It's happening all across the country. As you saw in that video, the Sun Belt area, it's happening there as well. So how do we fix this problem? We need to demand to our representatives to outlaw private equity from owning single family homes. This is the only way. There's no law against it. There seems to be no restrictions. And this is why they get away with it. We're not even talking 20 years down the line. They're saying 2030. 2030. So what do? Something has to change. Something has to change. But Wall Street, they are predicting by 2030, Wall Street will own your home. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super chat. Apozamosi? Could you please invite Whitney Webb? Thanks. I would love to, but I have no contact information from her. Please, if you do, let me know. Gus says BlackRock and Vanguard are buying up houses. Thank you, Eric Gray. We are living in a reality that is the result of the endless commodification of the natural world. Thank you, Snork. Buffet is mass buying houses in Iowa. Buffett is mass buying houses in Iowa. That doesn't surprise me. Julie, yes, Sabby, they are trying to make young generations not be able to own the starters or anything. Yeah. And they actually believe, they're like, well, the younger kids, they just want to live in shoeboxes anyway. Do they want to live in shoeboxes, or is that what they can afford? Thank you for the super chat, Jojo. I'm thankful to own a home. The down payment came from my mother's life insurance, but it's what she would have wanted. And I'll be damned if anyone takes it. And thank you, Meteor Dreams. Sabby, the Chinese are buying up all the homes. I don't know if I would make this just pointing at one group of people. It's the banks. It's Wall Street. And that's why we're in this situation. It's a hot mess, We are moving on to our next story here. Nikki Haley has not had a good day. Oh my God. So apparently Nikki Haley was recently in New Hampshire having a little town hall meeting in New Hampshire. And she was asked a question about the Civil War. Now, a lot of people are biting off Nikki Haley's head today for the response that she gave. But I think you need to understand how Nikki Haley has a tendency to flip-flop when it comes to racial issues. I happen to know firsthand because Nikki Haley used to be my governor. I remember when Nikki Haley was running for governor of South Carolina. And it's really interesting because Nikki doesn't like to talk about this too much. So we're going to go back and we're going to work our way up to what just happened today, because I want you to see how Nikki bobs and weaves when it comes to racial issues. You see, when Nikki Haley was a candidate for governor of South Carolina, oh my God, this gets me so frustrated. In 2010, she was actually pretty much a victim of racial comments herself. I want to take you back to that moment, 2010. SC lawmaker refers to Obama and Nikki Haley as raghead. See, I remember when all this happened. This was June 4th of 2010. Here we go. It has been quite a campaign for South Carolina Republican gubernatorial candidate Nikki Haley. Haley, who has the backing of Sarah Palin, has faced 2 allegations of extramarital affairs in recent weeks, both of which she has vehemently denied. Now she is in the middle of a controversy involving one of her rivals, State Senator Jake Knotts, who called her, along with President Obama, a raghead. This was the statement that he gave. We already got one raghead in the White House. not said on an internet political talk show last night, according to the state. The state is the newspaper of South Carolina. We don't need another in the governor's mansion. I'll let you take some time to process that. Okay. Haley's parents are Indian immigrants, and she was raised as a Sikh before converting to become Methodist. Citing those who saw Knott's comments, the state reports that he talked at length about Haley's parents' religion and her family on the show. Now, why did I want to show you that? Because when you hear some of the comments that Nikki Haley is making about the Palestinian people and that she's made about other Arab nations as well, and you'll see that again tonight as well, oh my God. I want you to remember that Nikki Haley was given some comments about her family's religion and their ethnicity when she was a candidate for governor. And I'm sure that wasn't the first time. She grew up in South Carolina. I lived in South Carolina for a couple of years. Racism is not covert there. It is very overt. People let you know exactly how they feel about your race to your face and your religion. So I wanted to remind you of that. Fast forward, the Confederate flag issue in South Carolina. For those who are not aware, when I was in college in South Carolina, there was a Confederate flag in front of the State House. You cannot miss it. If you drive down Gervais Street, it's kind of right in your face. There's the State House kind of sitting up on this little hill, and there's this big Confederate flag. The argument that had been given by state politicians before is that it was a memorial. There have been numerous protests to call for removal of the Confederate flag in front of the State House, mainly because, let me be clear here, not necessarily because it was offensive to people, but also because it was offensive to possible investors. You see, there were multiple companies that did not feel comfortable actually opening up locations in Columbia, South Carolina because of that flag. Steve Spurrier, who was the football coach at the University of South Carolina at the time, said that he actually had difficulty recruiting some of the best football players to come play for the University of South Carolina because their parents were offended by the flag. So a lot of this went back to Capitol. But I want to show you something that Nikki Haley did in reference to the Confederate flag. See, Sabby does not forget. Nikki Haley defended right to secession, Confederate History Month, and the Confederate flag in 2010 talk. Let's go to this. See, I know who Nikki is. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley defended states' rights to secede from the United States, South Carolina's Confederate History Month, and the Confederate flag in a 2010 interview with a local activist group that fights attacks against Southern culture. Now, 2010 was the same year that she was called a raghead. Haley, who was running for South Carolina governor at the time, made the comments during an interview with a new defunct, the Palmetto Patriots, a group which included a one-time board member of a white nationalist organization. The former UN ambassador also described the Civil War as two sides fighting for different values, one for tradition and one for change. So I'm pointing this out because I want to remind you guys, when you hear the recent comments from Nikki Haley about the Civil War, I want to remind you what she said about the Civil War in 2010. Haley announced last week that she was running for president, becoming first official major challenger to former President Donald Trump. The interview was posted on the group's YouTube at the time and resurfaced over the years, most recently by Patriot Takes, an anonymous Twitter account that monitors right-wing extremism. Let's go down here. This part here. I want to make sure I'm on the right part. Here we go. The group reportedly inspired Charleston shooter Dylan Roof. Oh, let me go up. Sorry. One of the Palmetto Patriots interviewers was Robert Slimp, a pastor and member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans and one-time board member and active member of the Council of Conservative Citizens, CCC, a white nationalist group. The CCC is a self-described white rights group that opposes non-white immigration and advocates for white nationalist ideology. The group reportedly inspired Charleston shooter Dylan Roof, the white nationalist who killed 9 people at a historically black church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. Now hold on to 2015. The shooting spurred Haley, then governor, to call for the removal of the Confederate battle flag from South Carolina State House grounds, where it had been since being removed from the state's Capitol dome in 2000. In a comment to CNN, Haley's spokesperson cited her decision to help remove the flag from the grounds, but declined to address Haley's other comments. Nikki Haley's groundbreaking leadership on removing the Confederate flag from the South Carolina Capitol grounds is well known, says Ken, who was her spokesperson. He wrote in an email to CNN. Now, this is to show you how Nikki Haley she flip-flops when it comes to racial issues. Because for one, you have the comments towards her about her ethnicity and her family's religion in 2010. Then you have the comments coming from her to defend what she would consider to be Southern culture and defend the Confederate flag. Then you have Nikki Haley calling for the removal of the Confederate flag. So she's been known to go back and forth. You heard about her comments earlier here about the Civil War. So the comments that she made that took over the news today, that was not a surprise to me because Nikki Haley has made those comments before. Nikki kind of just moves back and forth when it comes to racial issues. She tends to do what is best for her at that point in time in her political career. Defends the flag. In the 2010 interview, Haley said the Confederate flag was not racist, but part of heritage and tradition within the state. She called the flag's location a compromise of all people, that everybody should accept a part of South Carolina. But keep in mind, members of her own party in South Carolina didn't even want to accept her. You know, for those groups that come in and say they have issues with the Confederate flag, I will work to talk to them about it. So you see, Nikki Haley was willing to work with them. She was willing to work with the groups that disagreed with it. Let me try to persuade them to get them to understand. She went on to say, I will work and talk to them about the heritage and how this is not something that is racist. This is something that is a tradition that people feel proud of, and let them know that we want their business in the state. What did I tell you about Capitol? I told you part of it was just not about hurt feelings. Part of the reason for removing that flag was about business and Capitol, because some businesses did not feel comfortable setting up a location in Columbia, South Carolina because of it. And that flag, where it is, was a compromise of all people that everybody should accept as part of South Carolina. Now, here she switches gears. After the Charleston church mass shooting, Haley called on the state legislature to remove the Confederate flag from the state capitol, becoming one of the defining moments of her governorship. Then she goes on to say, there is a place for that flag. It's not in a place that represents all people of South Carolina. So Nikki, when it comes to these types of issues, she's been known to shift depending on how it is going to benefit her. Now, I want to take you back to this. Just a reminder, the role Nikki Haley's 2015 decision to remove the Confederate flag could play in her presidential run. Now, this was from Time magazine. This was February 14th of this year. This is the part I want you to see right here. This was after the shooting. After the service, Haley told her team she intended to call for the removal of the Confederate flag from the Capitol, according to Rob Godfrey, then her deputy chief of staff. She would ask lawmakers and community leaders to join her for a news conference, she said, but she wasn't sure how many would show up. In the end, she convinced a bipartisan group of lawmakers, including the son of Strom Thurmond, the infamous segregationist, to join her. The next month, the legislature passed a bill to take down the flag. So remember that, people. So 2015, that was Nikki Haley acknowledging that there was some racial, obviously some racism behind the flag. Not everyone may feel that way, but I can tell you from personal experience living in South Carolina. By the way, this was not that long ago. Living in South Carolina, I remember seeing bumper stickers with the Confederate flag that said comments like, never apologize for being white. I saw people who had t-shirts, Confederate flag t-shirts that said, get your hands off my flag. Some people, for some of them, it was a racist thing. For some people, they said it was a battle flag and it was part of their heritage because they had family members that were part of the Civil War, whatever. But it was very obvious that the flag was offensive. And my thing was, what was wrong with the American flag? Why we got all these different, why you got two flags? Why we doing this? Now, listen to this part. That decision Haley made 8 years ago embodies both the strengths and vulnerabilities of her presidential candidacy, which she launched Tuesday morning, becoming the first major challenger to former President Donald Trump. The former governor enters the race as a candidate who aims to unite the GOP's warring factions and usher in a new generation of the party's leadership, but whose history in a deep red state could also set her at odds with the party's far right flank. So that was the warning about her presidential candidacy. That was back in February. Okay. Now that you have seen some history in reference to how Nikki feels when it comes to racial issues, let's go into the comments that Nikki Haley made recently. At this event in New Hampshire, there was an audience member that asked her about the Civil War. Let's get into this, buddy.
Meanwhile, in New Hampshire, during a campaign stop, Republican presidential candidate, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, was asked this question by an audience member. Quote, what was the cause of the Civil War? This is how Governor Haley responded.
What was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was?
So people heard this today and they were like, oh my God, did you hear what Nikki Haley said about the Civil War? And she didn't even mention the fact that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. Didn't mention that at all. And for me, I was just kind of like, she's kind of said something like this before, which I just showed you years ago. So I was not surprised that she made that comment. Let's continue.
I'm sorry?
I'm not running for president. I wanted to see your opinion on the cause of the Civil War.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of the people are. And I will always stand by the fact that I think government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people. Government doesn't need to tell you how to live your life. They don't need to tell you what you can and can't do. They don't need to be a part of your life. They need to make sure that you have freedom. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
Thank you. And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me that you answer that question without mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
No.
So again, you have to remember where Nikki Haley grew up. She grew up in South Carolina. Okay. South Carolina profited heavily from the slave trade, particularly Charleston, South Carolina. What was the number one product that was produced and grown by slaves in South Carolina? That was rice. And people from South Carolina can tell you this. Nikki Haley knows this. So the fact that she would mention it, and then that voter pushed her a little bit and said, I'm surprised that you wouldn't even mention the word slavery. Her response is, what do you want me to say about slavery? Make no mistake, people. Nikki Haley didn't bring up slavery because Nikki Haley is pandering to her base. Nikki Haley knows that bringing that up opens up all other different types of doors. Because the thing is this, if you bring up slavery, then you got to acknowledge the fact that this country, and definitely her state, receives free labor. Free labor. You got to bring that up. You can't pretend like it doesn't exist. Okay? All right. So there's that. Then it comes into another question. Because if there would have been a follow-up question, it could have also been, well, do you think that African-American descendants of slavery deserve cash reparations because free labor happened in this country? So it gets into all this other stuff. Nikki Haley didn't bring it up because she didn't want to turn off the base of people that she's trying to win over. That's why she didn't bring it up. I just showed you her history. She had no problem. This woman had no problem calling for the removal of the Confederate flag in Columbia, South Carolina. But when she is asked about the Civil War, she won't even mention the word slavery at all. She talks about, oh, it's about people's rights. Rights for who? Because slaves didn't have rights. We're talking about a time when slaves were counted as two-thirds of a person? Or 2/5 of a person? Weren't even a whole person. They didn't have any rights. Let's continue.
You answered my question. Thank you.
Next question.
Mm-hmm.
So, Eugene, we can pick through that a million different ways. Perhaps the follow-up question where she says, what do you want me to say about slavery? Is what stuck with most people as they watch that commentary on Governor Haley, perhaps, but also about the state of the Republican Party. And as you watch the gears turning there, what she should and should not say in order to keep her support.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And if you watch the crowd as things were going downhill, you could start to see people kind of get a little squeamish as she was answering those questions. You know, my family's always been from South Carolina. So I am very, very well versed on the conversation that happens. I was just there earlier this week for Christmas. I'm very well versed in the conversation that happens versus, you know, whether it was states' rights or slavery, what was the real conversation. So she's showing.
Yes, 3/5. Thank you, Lorez. Thank you so much.
That, right? That she's a product of that conversation. This is also something in line with what she said before when asked when running for governor in 2010 about slavery or about the cause of the Civil War. Obviously, it was about slavery. If it was about states' rights, it was the state's ability to hold slaves. If it was about freedoms and what the government could tell you what to do, it was whether or not the government could tell you whether or not you can own and beat people, rape and kill them because they were your property, right? That is clear to everyone who has eyes and has read history books. But what she is showing is the fact that in the Republican Party right now, there is not a lot of room for folks who would say something like that, who would be honest about slavery as the cause and the main cause of the Civil War. You know,
let me pause here for a second, and I want to say why this is important in reference to a state like New Hampshire. What you have to understand, and I had to learn this when I moved to New England, what you have to understand is here in New England, you know, slavery is kind of like a taboo thing. Like there was a town in Rhode Island that just acknowledged, I think it was like a year ago, that they had slaves, which is really interesting considering that Rhode Island was actually the third largest slave transport. So they're kind of touchy-feely about it, right? There's also schools here. It has been known, and I've talked to people that grew up in Maine. It has been known that in some parts of Maine, they don't even teach this type of history. I had a friend of mine when I lived in North Carolina, and she was from Maine. She had never seen it. She didn't even know what a Confederate flag was. It just wasn't taught to her. So when you come up here in some parts of New England, some people are just kind of like, well, we don't really know because we weren't a part of this. Like, we weren't a part of, Civil War, et cetera, all that jazz. So I don't think she was expecting to get that type of question from someone in New Hampshire.
You think about the last few years and what the Republican Party has focused on, the conversation about race in this country, their attacking of critical race theory. So there's almost no other answer that she could give in this Republican primary that wouldn't, take some votes away from her as she is moving forward. I will say I got some texts from some of the staffers on the other campaigns of this exact message when it happened. But then when I asked them how their candidate would answer, they got a little pissed off at me and said, you would never ask them that question. And so it tells you that while they want this to knock her, they don't want to answer the question either.
Jen, this shouldn't have been hard. Slavery is the answer here. But to Eugene's point, it is reflective of where the Republican base is right now, that you can't tell a simple truth for fear of losing voters in what has become such a radicalized Republican Party. But let's take a step back and put this in the context of this primary.
But see, I think that he's missing the point as well. It's not about being difficult. It's not about the fact that it was hard for her to do or that it was difficult. Nikki Haley's playing a role. They all have these different roles that they play, right? And to be honest with you, so does liberal media. Because what the gentleman mentioned on that show is he said, well, this is where the Republican base is at. Not all of them. Not everyone who's Republican has issues with civil rights. Not everyone that's Republican would agree with what Nikki Haley said. This is what happens when you talk to people on the other side. So we got to remove that notion from our head. And we also have to remove the notion that everybody that is a Republican is racist. When people tell me that, it's really funny because I'm like, okay, what about Black people that are Republicans? It's just stuff like that. But I point this out because he wanted to bring up the Republican Party in reference to this. But I want you to see how CNN responded to this, because they actually blamed the voter. They blamed the gentleman who asked the question. Now, this is supposed to be a liberal network, CNN, right? So Glenn Greenwald actually called this out. If any other candidate refused to say slavery and glorified the Civil War this way, CNN would have declared a national racism emergency. But because DC elites are so desperate for Nikki Haley, watch CNN blame the voter for asking, then say her imperfect answer doesn't matter. This is very damning for CNN. And this was Caitlin Collins' segment. So let's go ahead and play this clip.
Front. Nikki Haley is in New Hampshire tonight making her case to.
Oh, let me make this louder.
She was asked tonight, just a few moments ago, by a voter about what was the cause of the Civil War. This is how she responded.
What was the cause of the United States Civil War?
Well, don't come with an easy question or anything. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? I'm sorry?
I'm not ready to president. I want to see your view on the cause of the Civil War.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government. What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you answered my question. Thank you.
Next question.
Now, it's not your average town hall question, but she did seem surprised by it. And the voter, as you could hear there, called her out for not mentioning slavery. What do you make of that answer?
Let me pause here for a second and explain to people as well. She was surprised by it because, again, she was in New Hampshire, and FYI, there aren't that many Black people in New Hampshire. If you've never been to New England, you coming up this way, if you're looking for Black people, you'll see us in Connecticut, you'll see us in Massachusetts, but after that, we are hard to find. I'm just keeping it real. We are hard to find. Once you get to New Hampshire, it's like, whoa. And there are Black people there, but there are very few. And it's like that as you go further and further. So I don't think she was expecting that to come from New Hampshire. Listen to how they respond to this. Listen to how they blame the voter.
Yeah, if I were her, that would have been pretty easy to just say that and move on. But it's also, I think, pretty clear that that voter was kind of trying to catch her and saying something that would potentially make her less appealing to those independent voters in New Hampshire that she's going to rely on so heavily. So this was an easy question to answer. I wish she had answered it using the easy word, say slavery. There's a disagreement in our country about it. But ultimately, I don't think it's actually going to hurt her standing one way or another with Republican primary voters at this point.
This is the voter trying to hurt her with independent voters. This is the voter asking a question. Asking a question. And this is on CNN. Let me explain to you why they're defending Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is establishment to the T. She supports the military-industrial complex. She's a warmonger. Nikki Haley wants to go to war. This isn't a secret. She's been vocal about this in the debates. So she fits that status quo. That's who they want. And also, the donors love her. She's pro-Israel. She wants to go to war. And she's not Donald Trump. And remember what I told you earlier on. The donors had already decided, according to Fox News, the donors had already decided that they were not going to go with Donald Trump this time. They said this time they wanted to go with Ron DeSantis. Well, Ron DeSantis didn't seem to poll as well as they thought that he would. Then they saw that Nikki Haley was actually doing pretty well in the debates. So then the donors decide, let's go with Nikki Haley. So this is how this works, people. If you just follow the money, you'll see why things are said on these outlets and why there's no pushback. That's why they are trying to defend Nikki and run cover for Nikki. Now, Nikki Haley did issue a response since this has been brought to the light. This was also shared by Caitlin Collins. Let's hear what Nikki Haley had to say.
The war was about slavery. We know that. That's the easy part of it. What I was saying was, what does it mean to us today? What it means to us today is about freedom. That's what that was all about. It was about individual freedom. It was about economic freedom. It was about individual rights. Our goal is to make sure, no, we never go back to the stain of slavery, but what's the lesson in all of that? The war was about slavery. We know that. That's the easy part of it. What I was saying was, what does it mean to us today? What it means to us today is about freedom. That's what that was all about. It was about individual freedom. It was about economic freedom. It was about individual rights. Our goal is to make sure, no, we never go back to the stain of slavery, but what's the lesson in all of that?
So this is Nikki Haley. Of course, she had to issue a response because there was tremendous backlash for this comment, the way she responded to that question. But the thing is just that, again, that was not a mistake by Nikki Haley. I want to be very clear. Nikki Haley is playing a role. She's playing the role that she believes she needs to play in order to either possibly win the Republican nomination, which I don't think is going to happen. It's obviously Trump is still far in the lead, or possibly get a VP spot, but she's declined. She wants to be Trump's VP, or maybe she's trying to become something else. Maybe she's trying to get another cabinet position. You never know. But Nikki Haley is there to play a role. Another thing I want to bring to your attention that you may not be aware of, and I'm pretty sure this could have caused some backlash within the family, because Nikki Haley's daughter, the one that Vivek actually mentioned in reference to having a TikTok channel, Nikki Haley's daughter her boyfriend is African American. So then there's that. So she couldn't just ignore it. She obviously had to issue a response. But Nikki is playing a role. And I've said this for quite some time. I always think that Nikki Haley was an opportunist. Now I want to show you again how she flip-flops when it comes to these issues. Because here she is here, breaking. Nikki Haley calls for Jews to leave Israel. They should go to pro-Zionist countries. The US, the UK, Saudi Arabia. Listen to it.
Where should the Palestinians go?
Well, they should be going through the Rafah Gate and Egypt take them. But I've always said that, what you should have is they should go to pro-Hamas countries. Qatar, Iran, if you send them there, Turkey, those are pro-Hamas countries. That's where they should go.
But they're on the run for their lives, taking whatever they can, their kids in tow. They're not able to get into Egypt. How are you supposed to even make it to Qatar at this point?
Isn't that telling that Egypt won't take them? Why won't Egypt take them? Because they don't trust which ones are terrorists and which ones aren't.
I don't care about Gaza. I literally don't care. For all I care, they can go out and swim in the sea. I want to see dead bodies of terrorists around Gaza. That's what I want to see.
ואני אכן גאה על כך שמנעתי את הקמתה של מדינה פלסטינית, כי היום כולם מבינים מה הייתה יכולה להיות המדינה הפלסטינית הזאת, אחרי שראינו את המדינה הפלסטינית הקטנה בעזה, כולם מבינים מה היה קורה, אלו היינו באמת מתקפלים מול הלחצים הבינלאומיים, ומאפשרים מדינה כזאת, גם ביהודה ושומרון, גם בסביב ירושלים, גם בפאתי תל אביב.
It's time that Gaza ends. The 2 million people who live there, they are clever assassins. They need to be removed from that land. That land needs to be turned into a national park. And since they're the voluntary mercenaries for Iran, they need to be dropped on the doorstep of Iran. Let Iran deal with those people.
Michelle Bachmann, everybody, she does a great job, doesn't she?
So see how they're comparing what Nikki Haley said to what they said? So here's Nikki Haley telling you, I don't know how else to say this again.
Where should the Palestinians go?
Well, they should be going through the Rafah Gate and Egypt take them. But I've always said that, what you should have is they should go to pro-Hamas countries. Qatar, Iran, if you send them there, Turkey, those are pro-Hamas countries.
So Nikki wants the Palestinian people to be displaced. She wants them to go to a pro-Hamas country. What kind of wild shit is this?
That's where they should go.
But they're on the run for their lives, taking whatever they can, their kids in tow. They're not able to get into Egypt. How are you supposed to even make it to Qatar at this point?
Isn't that telling that Egypt won't take them? Why won't Egypt take them? Because they don't trust which ones are terrorists and which ones aren't.
No, Egypt won't take them, not because Egypt has a problem with the Palestinian people. Egypt won't take them because they don't want the state of Israel to take over all of the land, because they know that that is their home, the Palestinian people's home, and they know what Israel is trying to do. That's why Egypt won't take them. Can you believe this woman? Can you believe her? Watch Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy capitalize off of what she said in that statement. Let's go to some of the comments here. But I had to show you, and sorry if that was long-winded, but I had to show you who Nikki Haley was. I had to go back and show you. Let's go to some of the comments here. I'm trying to see where I left off. Oh, sorry. Thank you for the super chat, Flower Bro. Occupy your representatives and demand they represent you. Call them, email them every single day. Well said, Flower Bro. Thank you for the super chat, Quintessential. Does Wu have ambitions beyond Boston? It wouldn't surprise me if she did. Just keeping it real. Sia says, Nikki Haley knows exactly what she's doing by playing stupid. This tells everybody to show her your back. Not a friend to people of color and a sellout to herself and Indians. Thank you, Eric Gray. Capitalism does not equal economic freedom, Nikki Haley, and her comments are a testament to her proximity to whiteness. And thank you for the super chat, Andre. Did you see Rising today in regards to Nikki's comments? Not yet. I haven't had a chance to watch Rising today yet. It was pretty busy. Black Ronan said 75% to 80% of slave ships were based in Newport, Rhode Island. That's right. And what did slaves help produce there? Rum. Thank you for the super chat, Amanda. 3/5 clause in Constitution calls for a modern revision. I agree. Thank you, Eric. Imagine being a Florida teacher having to explain to adults why learning Black history is important. But Nikki know this. Nikki, let me tell you again. Nikki grew up in South Carolina. Her father, at one point, taught at a historically Black college in South Carolina. Thank you for the super chat, Dwayne. Yeah, Nikki got the easy part wrong. Thank you, Chima. Nikki Nimarata Haley wants to be white so bad. Damn. And thank you, Dijon. America's economy, stock market came from slavery. Yes, the stock market. Well said there, guys. Well said. Oh, Nikki. There's a song by Prince called Darling Nikki. Go listen to it. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Thank you so much. That helps me out with the algo. And if you're new, don't forget to sub and share as well. Okay, now we are moving on from Nikki. Now we go into Chelsea Handler. Now, Chelsea Handler, comedian, actress, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with her. She also is receiving a lot of backlash from people based on a viral video that she made with Noah Tishby, who was a former model, a pro-Israel video that is getting a lot of backlash from people. Let's go ahead and get started with that. Oh, Chelsea. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Handler, and I'm here with my friend, best-selling author Noah Tishby, who the New York Times recently called a pro-Israel influencer, and some on social media call that Zionist bitch.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sitting with me, Chelsea.
Of course, I'm just happy
you.
to finally know an influencer who isn't trying to sell me shapewear with the nipples still on.
Yeah.
What are you selling?
The truth. I'm selling the truth because there is a lot of misinformation out there.
Right. Before we go any further, I want to be clear that we are pro-Palestinian and anti-Hamas, yes. And it is okay to question Israel's policies and still be pro-Israel.
Correct. So what happened on October 7th was the worst act of violence against Jewish people since the Holocaust. But progressives, especially on college campuses and on social media, have been...
Pause, because she's talking fast so that you don't pay attention to what she said. Let's go back to the October 7th remark.
Okay to question Israel's policies and still be pro-Israel.
Correct. So what happened on October 7th was the worst act of violence against Jewish people since the Holocaust. But progressive.
So she said, she's talking really fast. Let me slow it down for you. She said what happened on October 7th was the worst act of violence against Jewish people since the Holocaust. Really? The numbers don't show that. How do you go from first they said the number was 1,400. Then they were admitted, oh no, it's actually 1,200 because the IDF actually killed some of their own people. Wouldn't be the first time. 1,200. If I remember correctly, I believe that there were way more casualties in reference to the Holocaust than on October 7th. Do you see this? Look how many people have been killed in Gaza. They're saying what, over 25,000 people?
especially on college campuses and on social media, have been led to believe that any response by Israel to this attack is unacceptable and to victim blame Israel for the entire situation to begin with.
Which I don't understand because progressives should love Israel.
Israel is the single consistent democracy and the only progressive country in the entire region. Do you like free speech?
I like it.
Being able to criticize your government?
I
Do you
love
like
that part,
Great.
yes.
You can do that in Israel.
And do you like gay weddings? You know, the fun kind without straight people? So does Israel.
And how about freedom of press? Freedom of religion?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Women's rights?
Yes, I love to ski topless. I would like to continue doing so.
You know what else?
This is the most BS I've heard in this short of a video. We'll go back again. Oh my God.
The Holocaust. But progressives, especially on college campuses and on social media, have been led to believe that any response by Israel to this attack is unacceptable and to victim blame Israel for the entire situation to begin with.
Which I don't know.
Pause. So I wouldn't say that college students have been led to believe anything. Having worked in the university system for over a decade, I don't remember any of the administrators, any of the professors teaching this to students. What has happened is that the younger people today, especially by the time they actually came to me in college, they were already very resourceful. You got to remember, this is the group that has grown up with the internet, has grown up with social media. YouTube didn't exist when I was a kid. They grew up with all these things. They know how to look for other sources of information at their fingertips. Some of you may remember having to read through encyclopedias and having to actually go to the library to check out books, to do research papers. Kids nowadays don't have to do that. They know how to look at, okay, there's mainstream media. Let me see what Al Jazeera is saying. Let me see what the gray zone is talking about in reference to this issue. They are very resourceful. So Miss Tishby here is making you believe that these kids have actually been indoctrined at these universities to have these talking points, when actually the students know these things on their own because they've done their own research. Chelsea goes on to say progressives should love Israel.
To begin with.
Which I don't understand because progressives should love Israel.
Israel is the single consistent democracy and the only progressive country in the entire region. Do you...
Pause. This talking point they love to bring up, RFK Jr. does this as well. It's a democracy. Really? Is it a democracy? Palestinians that lived on that land and they were pushed out of the land, people being dragged out of their homes, that's part of a democracy. The lies that they're selling to people. They're saying you should be happy. You should be pro-Israel.
You like free speech?
I like it.
Being able to criticize your government?
I
Do you
like that part,
Great.
yes.
You can do that in Israel.
And
do you like free speech? Do you like being able to criticize the government? Free speech for who? Who? Not for the Palestinians. The Palestinians can't even have a peaceful protest without the IDF shooting at their feet. There's video footage of it.
Do you like gay weddings? You know, the fun kind without straight people? So does Israel.
And how about freedom of press? Freedom of religion?
Yeah.
Freedom of press and freedom of religion for who? Freedom of press for who? Because they don't even want the Palestinian people to tell their story. Why do you think they're killing all the journalists? She talks about freedom of religion. Okay, yeah, you can have your religion. But depending on what your religion is, depends on what types of benefits you will have living there. And that's not just for those who are Muslim. That applies to those who are Christian as well. All Palestinians are not Muslim. Some Palestinians that live there are Christians. Some of the Palestinians that live there are Jewish, but they still do not have the same rights and benefits as an Israeli Jew. So what is she talking about?
Yeah? Women's rights.
Yes, I love to ski topless. I would like to continue doing so.
You know what else is progressive? Free and fair elections.
Israel is our greatest defense in the Middle East for all of Western democracy and Western values. If Israel goes down, guess who they're coming for next?
Now they're trying to fearmonger. They're trying to fear. Look at this. The Western democracy part.
Progressive, free and fair elections.
Israel is our greatest defense in the Middle East for all of Western democracy and Western values.
What Western values? They still can't have interfaith marriage in Israel. That's not a Western, that's not what Western values is she referring to?
If Israel goes down, guess who they're coming for next?
All right, if you value being a progressive, just make sure that you stand for it.
And one of the best ways to stay informed on this subject is to follow Noah on Instagram at Noah Tishby.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. And Amisal Chai.
What she said, I skipped Hebrew school that.
I felt like I was watching two, like, I don't know, like two former like sorority sisters, like older now, just let's get together, make a video, like just saying the cringe stuff. This did not go well. This did not go well at all. And I want to show you some of the responses to this. Now, this is actually from Jean Dessalines. Yeah, he shared this video. Let me show you because I want you to see the response to it. So Jean actually posted this. Comedian Chelsea Handler and former envoy Noah Tishby released a pro video to convince progressives they are misinformed and really should be on the side of the greatest and only democracy in the region. Jewish person Jesse Mechanic is here to take down their flawed talking points.
Former Israeli envoy Noah Tishby released a pro-Israel video today that they said combats misinformation. I watched it and I found that it didn't combat much misinformation, but it almost entirely was misinformation. Let's dive in.
Progressives, especially on college campuses and on social media, have been led to believe that any response by Israel to this attack is unacceptable and to victim blame Israel for the entire situation to begin with.
Okay, no one said that any response would be unacceptable. No one said that. There was obviously going to be a response. The attack on October 7th was horrific, and there were innocent hostages involved. If there were special forces rescue missions, targeted attacks, if there was an acknowledgement that the Israeli government had been rounding up Palestinians for a very long time, thousands of them, and holding them without trial, and maybe there should be a hostage swap to maintain the sanctity of innocent life, there wouldn't be outrage like this. They've killed over 20,000 people, over 10,000 children. They bombed refugee camps and hospitals. They told people to flee to a region, that region would be safe, and then they bombed it. They've killed aid workers and journalists. The problem is not that there was a response. The problem is that the response has been genocidal. Now, in terms of the victim blame.
That's right. And they want you to forget all of those things and just feel happy because in Israel, they say it's a democracy.
It is not victim blaming to state that this is all part of a longer story of occupation, oppression, and violence. It is in no way justifying the October 7th attacks to put them in context. That is not victim blaming.
Which I don't understand because progressives should love Israel.
Israel is a single consistent democracy and the only progressive country in the entire region.
Is it though? Can a democracy be a multi-tiered society, an apartheid state? Can a democracy be an ethno state? Can a democracy be all but defined by a brutal military occupation? Many would say no. Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza do not have the same rights and freedoms of Israelis, not even close. They do not have freedom of speech, or assembly, or expression, or movement. It goes as deep as different license plates and different roads. It is the
That's the part, another part that they just want to skip over, right? They want to skip over that fact that they don't have the same rights as the Israelis. They just want you to say, well, it's a democracy. It's a democracy. So he was there basically to say some things to them. And then this is the second part of that video, because I think he stopped it short. You know, on Twitter, you can only upload a certain amount of the video unless you have a blue check. Listen to this.
As different license plates and different roads. It is a democracy for some, but a democracy for some is not a democracy.
Do you like free speech?
I like it.
Being able to criticize your government?
I
Do you
like that part,
Great.
yes.
You can do that in Israel.
Interesting. How about Military Order 101, which states any Palestinian, and there are over 3 million living in the occupied territories, who holds a gathering of more than 10 people that can be deemed as political by the Israeli military is illegal and punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Is that the free speech you're talking about? Is that the freedom of being able to criticize your government? Oh, wait. They're not their government. They didn't vote for them or elect them in any way, and yet They still control many aspects of their lives. Also, what about this? What about the wide reports that Israel is locking people in prison for social media posts?
Yep.
Is that the freedom you're bragging about?
And
the freedom of press.
Do you like gay weddings? You know, the fun kind without straight people? So does Israel. Yeah.
Gay marriage is not legal in Israel. It's not. You can have a gay marriage there, but they won't recognize it as one. They do
Oh, this is the piece I wanted everyone to hear. So for the people who are making that claim on social media, make sure you tag them with this video, because that is very important to hear. Think about what he just said, that gay marriage is actually not legal in Israel. You can have a gay wedding, but they won't recognize the marriage. Send it home, folks. Send it home to your friends. Send it home to your family members. You see, this is why Chelsea Handler is getting so much backlash for that video.
Recognize same-sex marriages performed elsewhere, but in Israel, nope. Now, is Israel more progressive on these issues than nearby countries? Yes. But this is brazen, unsuccessful pinkwashing, and it should be dismissed for the nonsense that it is.
Israel is our greatest defense in the Middle East for all of Western democracy and Western values. If Israel goes down, guess who they're coming for next?
What does this mean? Who's they? This honestly feels like Trump-level Western nationalist, isolationist nonsense. And I need to say one more thing just regarding their whole tone, this light, jovial, airy tone. When you take into account that they are using that tone to defend a government that has killed over 20,000 people, over 10,000 children, that has bombed refugee camps and hospitals and ambulances, that has left over 2 million people without a home, that has been dropping 50% unguided missiles wherever the fuck they want, that are committing genocide on people that they have trapped. When you take all that into account, this video should absolutely infuriate you. None of this is cute or sweet. Children are being bombed by the people you are defending while you are making this video defending them.
Very well said by him there. And another thing I want to add as well, it's almost like they want you to remember the 1,200 Israelis that have been killed, but they don't want you to talk about the 25,000 Palestinians that have been killed, over 8,000 children, right? I want to show you something that Max Blumenthal said in reference to Noah Tishby. I want people to realize who this woman really is. Max Blumenthal said, here's Israeli war minister and former PM Benny Gantz partying, at Tel Aviv luxury apartment with model turned propagandist Noah Tishby, while IDF troops were busy massacring, sheltering families and or dying in vain in the mud-soaked rubble of Gaza. So there's the woman right there that you just saw in the video with Chelsea Handler. So there she is, just partying it up while people were fighting for their lives or fleeing war in Gaza. This shows you who this woman is, who she really is. Again, she was with Israeli war minister and former PN Benny Gantz. So you see that? And there's something else that Max Blumenthal said as well. Someone tagged this in that crazy ass video that Chelsea Handler made. Nabil said they killed their own civilians and children and used them as an excuse to kill the Palestinians after accusing them of a crime committed actually by the Israeli army. This is a clip here from Max Blumenthal as well. They were using this to debunk what Chelsea Handler and Noah Tishby said.
And we saw the same thing take place after October 7th with the White House green lighting Israel's genocidal military operation in the Gaza Strip on the basis of lies, deceptions, and distortions of half-truths spun straight out of Netanyahu's office and into the mouth of Biden, starting with the 40 beheaded babies lie. But one of the greatest lies that hasn't been unpacked yet, which I delved into at the Gray Zone, was what actually took place on October 7th, and raising the question of how many Israelis were actually killed by the Israeli military using the same doctrine of disproportionate force and the indiscriminate use of heavy weapons that we're now seeing in the Gaza Strip. First of all, we now know from official Israeli statistics and confirmed deaths published by Haaretz that at least 50% of those killed were on military bases at the time. They were Israel's Gaza division, which was enforcing the siege of Gaza, active duty soldiers in uniform. They were the main targets of the Hamas commando division, their elite units. And Western media never showed the video shot by Hamas and Islamic Jihad commandos by GoPro cameras of them killing these soldiers who had been previously killing them in many military operations. They turned to the killing of civilians or Israeli non-combatants in order to create political space for what was to come next, the Israeli operation inside Gaza. Now, it's clear that in the attempt to take captives, Hamas militants did kill civilians. They were shot with Kalashnikovs. Some may have been killed with grenades. Those were the only weapons they carried. But if you look at the images of, for example, the homes in Kibbutz Be'eri, which was one of the main sites of hostage standoffs, these homes look like many of the homes in the Gaza Strip, which I've personally seen covering the 2014 assault on Gaza. Totally destroyed, cooked. Entire families were actually found in these homes, Israeli families, under rubble, as Palestinian families are now being found in Gaza. If you look at cars which were fleeing the Nova Electronic Music Festival, these cars were completely charred, melted, and many of the bodies that were found inside were also charred. And all of these images were taken and presented to Western media in various screenings and through these websites.
And you have to think about the weapons that Hamas had, and you have to ask the question, did they have the type of advanced weapons that would actually cause that type of damage? I said the same thing when I saw the picture coming from Hawaii after the fires in Hawaii. And there was that picture of all these cars that were pretty much charred, but all the doors were closed. And they said people got out and ran from the cars. And I was like, really? How come all the doors were closed? You mean to tell me things are on fire and you have time to stop and shut the car door? Just makes you wonder.
As casualties of Hamas's savagery, that they burned people alive, that they burned entire families alive. And what's absolutely clear and confirmed is that the Israeli military shelled these homes in Kibbutz Be'eri with tanks under orders from the top to, as one kibbutz security coordinator named Tuval Eskapa put it, to shell the homes on top of their occupants, even if they were Israeli. And we can go through so many other testimonies produced in Hebrew media, which I synthesized in my report to show a systematic campaign of friendly fire ordered from the top of the Israeli military to prevent Hamas military.
Okay, and it cuts off there. But one thing I want to add, I think it's important that we do counter a lot of some of these claims because people are just blatantly lying. Obviously, Chelsea Handler and her buddy Noah there were blatantly lying. They tried to make this look like a cute, cuddly kind of video and like, hey, I'm just hanging out with my girlfriend. Hey, girl. Like, this is not a time to, when you're talking about that subject, like, this is not something to laugh and joke about. This is not a sisterly bond moment, So these are the things that we need to think about. To me, it showed that once again, going back to what Lee Camp revealed a couple of days ago, there are celebrities that are being paid to release this information. They're being paid to make these videos, to be pro-Israel, to try to sway the narrative, but it's not working. And Chelsea Handler is just another one. It was Jerry Seinfeld, right? I think we all know Michael Rappaport. Like, there's a bunch of them that are coming out of the woodwork. All of a sudden, some of them you haven't heard from years. Now, all of a sudden, they're back in the limelight again to talk about this particular issue. And I feel that Chelsea Handler got it incredibly wrong. And I felt that video showed that she is completely out of touch with what the Palestinian people are going through. And in reference to casualties that have been done against Israelis, I didn't see Chelsea Handler or Noah Tishby talk about the Hasidic Jews in Israel that have been beaten, and I've seen the videos, that have been beaten by the IDF because they are not Zionist. So if they cared that much about the Israeli people, why are they ignoring those things that are happening? Something to think about. Got to watch these celebrities, man. When the narrative isn't working from the State Department, who do they send in? Let's get a celebrity spokesperson. Where's Oprah when you need her? Thank you so much for the super sticker regime. Stephanie says she was on Epstein Island. I think Stephanie's either referring to Chelsea or Noah. The Oracle says Israel is not a democracy for Palestinians. That's right. Thank you for the super chat, Juanita. Thank you, Randy. Gay marriage is banned in Israel. That's right, Randy. That's right. Thank you, Justin. I would give up my right of free speech if that's all it would take to stop this genocide. And the No Labels podcast says, funny how celebrities will do anything they're told by their producers and publicists. This is true. This is very interesting. Very interesting. We're going to our last story here, and we will do call in tonight, guys. I figured you might want to do it. We will do call in tonight, so hang on. But we're going into our last story here. CENK UYGUR actually had somewhat of a debate with Roland Martin on his show Unfiltered about CENK UYGUR's run as a Democrat, where progressives stand in the Democratic Party, and how we can actually get some type of wins for progressive policies in this country. Through all this rambling, there is one thing that neither of them mention in this discussion, which is very obvious as to why things are working the way they are. And I think they're very much aware of that. But again, Roland Martin, he is pro-Democrat. He's actually one that'll tell you to vote for Joe Biden. You'll see in this conversation, he's cheering on people like Beto O'Rourke. So he has no problem with Dem establishment. CENK UYGUR calls himself a progressive Democrat. But at the end of the day, they're both Democrats. They're both fine with being a part of a corporate party and dealing with all of this jazz. Let's get into this conversation here. There's a couple of things I want to debunk that's a part of this conversation that they obviously leave out.
I've long maintained that when we talk about big tents, that the Democratic Party actually has a much larger tent than the Republicans. Republicans, you're either right, far right, or fascist. But then when you talk about Democrats, you have conservative Democrats, you've got moderate Democrats, you've got progressive, you've got far left. And Democrats have always had a difficulty on bringing this coalition together because it's so varied interest. Yet your thesis is that progressives are going to take over the country. How?
Yeah, so mainly by younger voters, honestly, and it's not that difficult. The only thing we got to make sure doesn't happen is that Trump doesn't win in 2024, because that could just end democracy. But as long as we have democracy, in 2016 and 2020, Bernie Sanders was winning younger voters in massive margins, and I explained.
Let me just pause here because it's already hitting off on the wrong foot, right? CENK UYGUR said, as long as we have democracy. But we don't. We don't have true democracy in this country. CENK UYGUR knows this. So why is he sitting here in this conversation pretending like we do have democracy when he knows that we don't? He knows we don't have true democracy in this country because he knows that the DNC is able to cheat people whenever they do it. They're cheating him right now. So why is he sitting here pretending like these things are not happening? Disingenuous.
That in the book by 40 points, 50 points. And so younger voters, though, kept getting older and older because that's normal. That's what happens. So by 2020, he was winning under 45-year-olds. And now when you look at the polling, under 50-year-olds are now massively progressive. We just need one candidate to spark a fire, and we're going to easily take over this country. Because Roland, progressive ideas are intensely popular. Almost all of our policies are favored by 2/3 of all Americans, let alone the huge margins we have with young voters.
But how are you going to take over the country? He says you need a firebrand, right? So like Bernie Sanders, someone will say Bernie Sanders was that firebrand. You need a firebrand. But it's not about whether or not you have a firebrand if you're running in the Democratic Party. It's about whether or not the DNC is actually going to allow you to become the nominee. Unlike the Republican Party, the Democratic Party has super delegates. That's actually what screwed Bernie Sanders over in 2016, when the super delegates decided to give states to Hillary Clinton that Bernie Sanders had pretty much won outright. That's where the DNC fraud lawsuit came in. So it's not about that. It's about the fact of whether or not the DNC and the donors are going to allow that candidate to become the nominee. And the only way that is going to happen is if it is someone who is establishment. And we need to think about what the word progressive means today. because now there are Democrats like Katie Porter calling herself a progressive, when I would not consider Katie Porter to be progressive. If you're out there shilling for the state of Israel and you won't acknowledge that the Palestinian people don't have self-determination and don't have the same benefits and are fighting for their lives just to basically exist in the country that they were a part of, that they're trying to push them out of, I would not consider you to be progressive. We had pundits out there calling John Fetterman progressive when he clearly told you as a candidate when he was running that he was not a progressive. So we need to think about what the word progressive actually means, because the Democratic Party has co-opted that word to apply to anybody now.
But isn't that part of the problem? Is this notion of a candidate striking the nerve? I look at Texas. I'm born and raised in Texas. I'm still a registered voter there. We had Beto O'Rourke, who was running for governor. 75% of voters under the age of 30 didn't even vote. This guy went to every county. He was out there. He was going to college campuses. He was talking about the issues. We're seeing what they're doing in Texas when it comes to abortion, when it comes to voting rights, when it comes to education, whatever. Yet young voters didn't show up. So I get your argument about.
Pause. This guy brings up Beto O'Rourke. Jink mentioned a firebrand. Beto O'Rourke was not a firebrand. Beto O'Rourke was an establishment Democrat who said one progressive thing, which was, we're going to take your guns, right? Obviously, that doesn't work in a state like Texas. But he's not progressive. But that's who, to Roland Martin, in his mind, when you say firebrand and you say progressive, he thinks about Beto O'Rourke, a corporate establishment shill. Beto O'Rourke was taking money from ExxonMobil. And he wants to complain that young voters didn't show up to support him. This guy was corporate. He was not progressive. He's just a rich dude playing politics. You guys know that, right? Beto O'Rourke is a rich man who's just playing politics. That's it.
The numbers with Gen X and millennials, but they got to show up.
Yeah, but Roland, two things about that. Number one, you don't have to worry about under 30-year-old voters anymore, because like I said, younger voters aren't that young anymore. That generation has grown up and they have remained as progressive as they started. So now we're talking about millennials and Gen Z. And so we're talking about two generations. So under 50, the minute we reach about 55, which is the next election, that's the majority of the voters in the Democratic primaries. We win the Democratic primary and we win the general election easily.
But
the second thing is,
Jane, 55 plus votes, though. I mean, when I look at the numbers, especially African Americans, 65 and older, they're like, man, you need to call me. I'm going. 55, 64, they're voting. The problem is when you drop 54 and below, that numbers keeps going down. Yeah. And the reality is, it's not always going to be a candidate that excites me. Shouldn't issues be exciting people?
But what issues are the candidates running on? You see, and let's be real, because Roland trying to play dumb. Okay. Bernie Sanders excited people because of the issues that he was running on. He won the younger base, because he was running on issues that appealed to that group. Free college, canceling student loan debt, Medicare for all, giving everybody Medicare, right? So he ran on issues that actually appealed to that base. So when Roland Martin tells you that shouldn't the issues basically inspire those younger voters to come out, that did happen. That happened in 2016, and that happened in 2020. Where the younger voters, remember, especially in 2020, Bernie Sanders had the youth vote. Let's all remember that. Now, all of a sudden, Roland's trying to pretend like that never happened. That being said, after 2020, when Bernie Sanders told his supporters to support Joe Biden, some of them did, some of them stayed home. After that, no, you can't expect these kids to become inspired again, to go out there and believe these politicians run on the. You can't expect that to happen again with someone running through the Democratic Party, because they got played. They were played 2 election cycles in a row, 2016 and 2020. So Roland Martin is trying to blame the voters instead of blaming the politicians for not implementing policies that actually will benefit that base.
So, Roland, there's so many things to say about that. Number one, you're right. The issues are the things that matter the most. But the problem is that our system depends on media coverage. So I'll give you a perfect example. Paid family leave is at 84%. It's not like you have to convince any more people in a democracy that should pass easily. That's moms getting 12 weeks off after they have a baby. Literally every other developed nation does that. We're the only ones that don't. And almost every nation on earth does it. Estonia gives moms 82 weeks off, but Americans say we get 0 days off. It's unbelievable. It's unconscionable, right? So we've already won on that issue as we've won on almost every issue.
Pause. He's talking about paid family leave. Why are we waiting for one presidential candidate to implement paid family leave for people in this country? I want to show you a faster way. We'll get back to the video, but I want to show you another way that this can be done. You guys know how I feel about local actions and what we can do in the state. I want to let you know that Massachusetts passed paid family leave. Here's an example here. Massachusetts passes groundbreaking paid family and medical leave law. So let me just go here. So you'll see there are other states, map of paid family and medical leave laws. Washington State, it usually starts West Coast first, by the way. I don't know why, but it usually starts on the West Coast and it goes to the East Coast, and then it kind of makes its way towards the middle. Washington State, California, New Jersey, New York, obviously here, Massachusetts. And is that, I can't even see what state that's pointing to. I'm sorry, guys. They should have just pointed that out. And then also Hawaii, states with temporary disability insurance only. You'll see Hawaii right there. But I can't even see. I think that's, are they pointing to Maryland? That might be Maryland. I can't even see what they're pointing to. Damn it. Anyway, let's go down. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker signed into law today a groundbreaking paid family and medical leave law. Massachusetts joins California, New Jersey, Rhode Island, New York, Washington, D.C., and Washington State, which have already passed paid family leave and medical leave laws. Goes on to say here, Massachusetts law began providing benefits in 2021 and will cover nearly all private sector employees. The law offers 12 weeks of job protected paid family leave to bond with a new child, including a child newly placed for foster care or adoption, to care for a seriously ill loved one, or to address the impact of the family member's military deployment. It is also the first state law in the nation to allow workers to take job protected paid time off up to 20 weeks for their own serious health needs. And for those caring for veterans or service members injured or sick as a result of their military service, the law provides up to 26 weeks of job protected paid family leave, the first state law to include additional paid time for military caregivers. So I ask you this question, and we'll get back to CENK. Why are people sitting around waiting for a president to implement a law that we can get passed in the states? This is where we got to push for the local actions. By the way, for those who are not aware, Governor Baker was a Republican. Governor Baker was not progressive at all. And considering we had the pandemic in this country, after the height of the pandemic in 2020, every single state should have pushed for paid family leave and Medicare for all in the states. Every state should have passed it. So what are you talking about, CENK? Why are you sitting around twiddling your thumbs, waiting for a presidential candidate to implement something that we could get done here locally in the states, guys? We are our own heroes. We are our heroes, not the presidential candidates, not the president of the United States. Some of these things we can get done right now. Let's get back to this discussion.
But the problem is the media will then take that, and when Joe Manchin kills it and Joe Biden ignores it, they'll say, oh, they're the moderates. Well, that's not the moderate position. That's a 16% radical extremist position. So why do you need a candidate to galvanize these folks? Well, that's because the candidate is what draws the media attention. And the problems with like Democrats and why I entered the presidential race is because everybody whispers. Everybody whispers. Stop whispering. Donald Trump screams from the rooftops, and whether we hate it or not, it works. Meanwhile, Joe Biden goes, and then doesn't propose paid family leave as a standalone bill, doesn't propose any of these bills that are 70% and higher, never fights Republicans. We need someone who's a fire breather, who's going to fight for Democratic voters and the American people. The minute you have that and that person gets media attention is the minute we win everything easily.
But how? Okay, so then explain to me then, how does the Beto O'Rourke lose to Ted Cruz by 2.5 points?
Because Beto O'Rourke was not a firebrand. I don't understand. Guys, do you understand what's happening? Roland Martin, he's supposed to be the voice for the Democratic Party, reaching out and expressing issues that also affect the African-American community as well. But Roland Martin, like many that are part of his generation, and no shade to you guys, but many that are part of his generation are continuing to push for things that hold us back. This is why we don't get anywhere. People tell me, how come there's no changes? Think about all the things that activists were able to accomplish in this country. Think about the civil rights movement. Think about the women's rights movement. Think about the worker movements that have happened in this country. Do you think they just sat around saying, well, Beto O'Rourke? No, they weren't waiting for these politicians to come do something for them. They got out in the streets and they pushed with their movements and their activism, and they demand. What are our demands? Because you have to have them. But Roland Martin, you are holding us back. People like you. That in the end, after we watch this genocidal maniac who's supported by Joe Biden, in the end, let's just keep it real. Because Roland, you're going to tell your viewers to support Joe Biden. You were holding us back. Members like you, the Black Church, the Greek organizations, that people like Jim Clyburn constantly cater to, you're holding us back. You're keeping things exactly as they are. And people like me, man, my generation, we're tired of that. We're tired of you holding us back. You got yours. Let's keep it real. A lot of people don't want to mention this, but I'm going to go there. Some of you that are Black boomers, you got yours and you kept on moving. You got yours. A lot of you have these things. A lot of you have a house. You don't want to hear about no Medicare for all because you're already at the age to have Medicare. So you all set. You don't want to hear about pushing back against police brutality and all that stuff because you like, no, we had Martin and we had Malcolm and we had a civil rights movement. We need to be happy for what we have. No, fuck that. Y'all sold out. You got comfortable. And the rest of us, we just got left behind. Because instead of empowering us to be the next Malcolm, to be the next Martin Luther King, you told us to vote for Jim Crow Joe. Come on, man.
Comes back, same Beto, same fire breather, same passion, same hard campaigner, same big fundraiser, loses to Greg Abbott by 11 points.
Yeah. No. So first of all, Beto, not a fire breather. Look.
Well, come on, Jay. I mean, my goodness, how much? It's not like Beto was a passive dude compared to other Democratic candidates.
Yeah, I know, but Roland, we're talking about a different level here. So let me explain what I mean. So when you say paid family leave, for example, that sounds boring, and then people are like, "Hey, what is that?" And if you go, "Hey, I'm in favor of it," you're not going to get the 84% animated. you might get them to go, oh, yeah, that makes sense, and I like that. But then that's if they hear, but most likely they will not hear. Here's how you say it to get people's attention. Why do Republicans hate moms? They claim to be pro-life, but they hate babies and moms. Now, everybody in the press, if you're as large as Beto O'Rourke was, would cover that story. And they say, oh, that's an outrage. How can you say that Republicans hate moms? Well, they won't even give them 12 weeks off. They won't give them a day off after they deliver a baby. It is true that they hate moms.
Let me pause here for a second, because Cenk is, again, he's trying to make this the attention to be on the Republican Party. And I want to be very clear. When we talk about paid family leave, see, this is how you got to discuss these things. Stop making it a partisan divide. This is not about Republican or Democrat. We talk about paid family leave, which I just showed you from Massachusetts. It's not just about moms. It's also about taking care of an elderly family member. It's also about just being a caretaker. It's also about people that have to deal with family members that are actually in the military and they have to leave to serve overseas. It's about those types of things. It's not just being a mom. Now, Cenk could have actually really nailed this if he didn't make it a partisan divide. This isn't a partisan divide. If you are a parent, if you're a caretaker, if you have a sister, a brother, a father, a mother, if you have a member in your family that's a member of the armed forces, this is about all of us. This is the thing. This is why I don't get these people, man. I don't get these people. You didn't learn anything from 2020? You didn't learn anything from 2016? The way you appeal to these people is not by saying, oh, well, the Republicans want to do this and the establishment Democrats want to do that. Paid family leave affects everybody, and it would benefit all of us. And the federal government has enough money to make it happen. I said the same thing about the schools. Public schools got to be funded by property taxes. That's bullshit. The same way the federal government funded the Dodge schools that I attended is the same way the federal government can fund those public schools. We're not talking about this the right way.
On behalf of corporations who are all paying them through campaign donations. But Democrats never say that. They never even go to the number one issue that they could use against Republicans, corruption. And the reason they don't go to that is because they also take corporate cash. So if you have a clean, progressive candidate, and this is the giant if though, Roland, which is that the press pays attention to and is willing to hear out, and then the country will hear these. But you can't just whisper it. And Beto is not enough of a fire breather. He hired the same campaign manager as Joe Biden. When his campaign was over, she went to Joe Biden. These are super moderate consultants that advise all of their Democratic candidates. Shh, don't be impolite. Are you nuts? Donald Trump already won the election. He's almost certainly going to win this next one. And he's the most impolite guy in America.
So
Wake up, Democrats.
And why is that? It's not because Donald Trump was a firebrand or was impolite. That's what Cenk is trying to allude to. No, Donald Trump won because the American people needs were not being met from his predecessor. Obama made a lot of promises and did not deliver. Barack Obama gave you Donald Trump. Think about it, folks. Now we're in another situation where Joe Biden made a lot of campaign promises, did not deliver. We still live in a country where the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. Give me a fucking break. Did not increase it at all. No $15 minimum wage. Nothing. So now, once again, we are in a situation where the Democrat president will give you Donald Trump. Donald Trump was able to win in 2016 because he spoke to working class people in a way that Hillary Clinton failed to articulate. Hillary didn't know how to talk to people. She talked at them. And you can't go into those towns talking to people like they're less than you, whether you think they are or not, talking down to people in those towns because you sit up on your high horse and you came from a privileged elite family. You can't talk to people that way. So he knew how to relate to those people. So how we get back in this situation again? Because the Democratic Party did not deliver.
Democrats.
So the candidates you're describing, who are they? Like, for instance, right now, name me 3 candidates that have won statewide that fit your description of being this fire breather? If a Beto wasn't in that category, who?
So there's only one that comes close, and that is because several generations of Democrats have been taught and trained to be obedient, to be civil, do not cause any good trouble, do not cause any trouble at all, lay down and let the Republicans run over you. On a state level, to give you the very specific question that you asked, the answer is John Fetterman. And he beat the hell out of Dr. Oz when he couldn't even speak, when he had a stroke and everybody saw he couldn't speak. Why did he beat the hell out of Oz? Because he was impolite, because he made fun of the brother 24/7. He crushed him. He was merciless. And if he hadn't had that stroke, he'd probably be the next president. Here's a candidate at the presidential level. Me. Okay, so
here's the first mistake. Cenk Uygur is he's sitting up here pretending like John Fetterman is progressive, and he's not. John Fetterman won. Part of the reason why he won, which Cenk Uygur won't tell you, is because he was endorsed by Hillary Clinton. He was endorsed by a corporate Democrat. You guys can look this up. Okay? John Fetterman won because he vowed to support the state of Israel, Cenk Uygur. Publicly said that he would. Denounced BDS. Did not support the Palestinian rights. That goes far when you are running for a position in Congress. So John Fetterman didn't face all of this money being put up against him at the last minute like others did. That's who he chooses to bring up. John Fetterman, not a progressive. Let the Fet go. Okay? Progressive Democrats still want to hold on to John Fetterman as their golden horse. Let the Fet go. He supports the genocide that's happening in Israel. He backs Joe Biden's actions. He does not support the Palestinian people. He's nasty as hell to people. Let John Fetterman go.
Now, I got an incredibly hard road. Everybody knows that. I'm not a natural born citizen. I'm born Muslim. I'm a talk show host, not a politician. And so I got 1,000 obstacles to get over. But you know what? I'm all over the press and I'm screaming from the rooftops things that everyone agrees with. And whatever show I go on, Roland, it's not just left wing. Even when I go on right wing shows where they're like, yeah, well, higher wages would be good. Lower drug prices would be good. Wouldn't it be amazing if there was actually a fighter against corruption and on behalf of all these issues? You take my attitude, you put it on someone that the press considers quote unquote credible, and that person wins easily. Go fight. Republicans fight like crazy. That's why everybody's going to show up for Donald Trump and nobody's going to show up for Joe Biden because that guy doesn't fight for anybody.
Okay.
No one's going to show up for you either, Cenk Uygur, because the reality is you've already been removed from the ballot in Florida, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Tennessee. So let's keep it real. What is Cenk Uygur even talking about? He knows he has no shot. He just wrote a book, though. He knows he has no shot. He knows that the final decision comes down to the DNC. He knows that. But he's telling you he got a chance.
So you say you said one example statewide is a Fetterman. So you say one example statewide is a Fetterman who right now is getting blasted with a position regarding Israel.
Don't cough in the mic.
But you also talk about someone like yourself. Yet when you ran for Congress, you only got 5% of the vote. You came in free. So if you could not make that work in a congressional race, getting 5% of the vote coming in fourth, how do you think that works nationally?
Yeah. So first of all, so you're not wrong to bring that up. I totally get it. I got 6.6%, and that number sucks. Okay. And so you say, okay, why come this didn't work? Okay, so at a local, and then how dare you on a presidential level? Let me explain both sides of it. So number one, at the local level, it's harder than the presidential race. And I know because I just did both. I'm in the middle of doing one, I did the other one. And so why is Congress harder? Because mainstream media comes and smears the living hell out of you. For me, they call me anti-Muslim when I'm Muslim. I mean, they just lied about every single thing about my past. And if I saw the articles in the LA Times and New York Times and I never knew anything else about me, I would have voted against me. I wouldn't have voted for an anti-Muslim, racist, sexist, etc. guy, but that's not at all who I am. So they just smear you, and then they never give the mic back, Roland. Like, there was no press, no interviews, no nothing. I asked the LA Times, are you guys ever going to write an article about the policy issues in this race? And they literally said, no, we're only going to do the fake scandals against you. They didn't say fake, obviously. And that's it. That's it. All we're going to do is smear you. Now, at the presidential level, it's actually a little bit easier to get the mic. And so when you come in at 6.6% on a congressional race, you're going to come in at 0% on the presidential level, right? I mean, at the presidential level, we got Governor of Arkansas and Governor of North Dakota coming in at 0 and 1%. We got Chris Christie at 2%. So there's no chance that I'm going to get a number at the presidential level, right? Wrong. Quinnipiac poll, 2%. I'm higher than 3 governors. Why? Because, first of all, Young Turk's a nationwide, worldwide show. So whatever I get in a congressional district, I can get at the national level. But second of all, Roland, it's because I'm actually now in a lot of the media. I've been doing a lot of black radio. I've been doing a lot of online shows. I've been doing every kind of show there is. Did Breakfast Club yesterday. Here I am with you, Roland. Today,
I've been doing a lot of black radio, Roland. Look, CENK UYGUR sounds like a used car salesman. The reality is this: he's already been removed from the ballot in 4 states. Not just him, but Marianne and Dean Phillips as well. They've all been removed in 4 states. 2, he was not born in the United States. Now, he's a naturalized citizen. He said that he can challenge this with the Supreme Court. I do not see the Supreme Court trying to move aside all these other cases that come their way that are actually much more important than CENK UYGUR's vanity project of running for president of the United States, and pushing that to the front and saying, okay, CENK, we're going to actually help you here and let you get a pass. No. That is not going to happen. Like, this is hilarious to me.
okay? And once people hear this message, they're like, oh, someone who's not just going to sit there, someone who we don't have to beg to do things. As soon as Joe Biden wins or any Democrat wins, and what does everybody do? We all have to beg them to do the things that they promised. We have to push them. Why? We already elected you. Why don't you just do it already? Imagine having a Democrat who's going to get in there and he can't wait to pass bills, because who wins is irrelevant. Who cares if it's CENK UYGUR or Joe Biden or Marianne Williamson? That's just status and title. The only thing that matters is passing bills, because when you pass bills, you change lives. Higher minimum wage, lower drug prices. But we haven't had a Democrat fight like that in 40, 50 years. So the only issue is getting enough media rolling.
Okay, but all right, I get that point, but the reality is you can get a lot of media, but it's not like that still means you get votes.
Right. And the perfect example of that is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders got a lot of press in 2020, right? But Bernie Sanders did not win the Democrat Party nomination again, just like he did not win it in 2016. The DNC decided not to give it to him with the superdelegates. And of course, Bernie Sanders himself told you to go ahead and support Joe Biden. Right? He said, don't come out and vote for me during the pandemic. So it's not just about getting the media attention. Yes, that is part of the problem. But if you're getting the media attention and the DNC is what prevents you from moving forward, then the problem is the powers that be, which is the DNC, and not necessarily just the media. The media is one hurdle that you have to get over. But Bernie Sanders is the best example to point to show that he got over the media hurdle, but he still had to deal with the challenges with the DNC.
Howard Dean got lots of media. Vivek on the Republican side is getting lots of media. Granted, voting hasn't started yet, but if you look at polling, it's not like he's killing it. But again, it comes down to media attention is one thing. As you said, Senator Sanders got lots of media. I will bring up Beto again. Senator Elizabeth Warren got lots of media when she ran 2020. I think her biggest mistake, she should have actually run in 2016. I think that was the biggest mistake. But the bottom line, so I get that. But being a fire breather does not necessarily mean people are going to vote for you. And when you can only name one person statewide in the country, you need 270 elected. You got to win more states to win.
Right.
We're going to end this conversation here because I do want to do call in, but I want to point out something that is left out of this entire conversation. They brought up the issue of the media, the Republican Party. Roland Martin here tried to blame young voters. You know what they didn't mention? The money. What's the biggest issue? The money. Donor money, donor interest, candidates backed by Wall Street, candidates backed by the military industrial complex, and the DNC gets loads of money. So at the end of the day, the party is corporate. It is controlled by corporations and the military industrial complex. And if you actually want to be the nominee of that party, you also are going to have to agree to be controlled by Wall Street and the military industrial complex. This is not to say that you can't run. They'll let you run, but will they let you get the nomination? And nowadays, you definitely got to be pro-Israel. So there's that. They don't bring it up. Entire conversation, it's just disingenuous. Disingenuous. Let's go to some of the comments, and then we are going to do call in. Thank you for the super chat, Dwayne. Hollywood airheads paid to trivialize genocide. That's right. Ashura says Roland has to defend Massa, Joe Biden, and the Democrats. Tia says the word progressive honestly means nothing since you can clap that label on anything like it is supposed to be Scotch tape. Thank you for the super chats, Eric. We need a Roland Martin versus Phil Scott, the YouTube commentator debate, because it would be even more fun to watch. I would love to see that. I would love to see that. Thank you for the super chat, Super Seamster. Wish I had more. Love you and RBN for life, Bakersfield. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aspen Fallen. As Obama used to say, we are the ones we've been waiting for. He at least got that one right. Hashtag save Hardlands Media. Yes, guys, please go show Kit some love over on Twitter. Go to the Hardlands Media account and drop a chat for them. Thank you for the super chat, Willis. Fact Sabby, stay on those shills, backs rolling. Thank you, Chima. Maryland is a Democratic Party stronghold, yet our politicians won't give us paid family leave, and Baltimore is literally an apartheid state in itself. Yeah, I know. My parents are from Baltimore. I am well aware, hon. And thank you for the super chat, Jay. The Dem Party is not having presidential debates like a demo once. I wonder if Roland Martin has a problem with that. That is a good question. We are going to do calling, guys. Let me bring up the screen here. Computer love. Yes, we are on episode 143. Nikki Haley's comment, Wall Street Homes, Chelsea Handler, and anything else that you want to talk about. I just want to make sure that I put the link in the chat because I don't think I've done that yet. No, I haven't done that yet. Computer love. How do I go to? Oh, okay, here we go. All right. Keeping your head above water, making a way when you can. Temporary layoffs, good times. Easy credit ripoffs, good times. Such an and surviving. Hanging in a child line. We be lucky we got 'em. Do, 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 do. Good times. Okay, I got it. I got the link here. And I'll just add this to the chat. Making a way when you can. Temporary layout. That song has been in my head all day. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I heard it somewhere and then it's just kind of been stuck there. Okay. Call in episode 143. Marvin said Booker Bookman. Guys, if you haven't seen the show Good Times, you have to watch Good Times at least once in your life. Damn. All right, let's go ahead to call in, guys. That link is pinned to the top of the chat. You can just go ahead and click on that. I'll head on over there and that'll be that. All right, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.